Hey, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Howard Jacobson. Before we get to today's show, a quick reminder that this podcast is free for everyone and supported by those who can afford it. So if you have found this podcast a useful companion during 2020 and you'd like to see it continue through 2021, I would invite you to go to plantyourself.com/gift if you are in a position where you have the means to support something that means something to you and hopefully you think is doing good in the world. You can use PayPal or Patreon. You can make a one-time contribution or become an ongoing, sustaining patron of the show. And if funds are too tight for you to show your appreciation in a monetary sense, you can still leave a review of the Plant Yourself podcast on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. That also helps us a great deal. All right, on to today's episode. This is the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of plantyourself.com, the Big Change Program, and wellstarthealth.com. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live an unlimited and sufficiently uncomfortable life. Today, I'm pleased to welcome back a repeat guest, Bob Cafaro. He's a professional cellist. He's the author of an inspirational book, When the Music Stopped, and he is an ass kicker of multiple sclerosis. If you missed our first conversation, you can check it out at plantyourself.com/153. Gosh, that was a couple of years ago, I guess. Anyway, Bob's back because I subscribed to his newsletter, and every month or so he'd send out like a really good article. He's got almost nothing to sell except for his book. He's still a professional performing cellist, so it's not like he started up a company that sells anything. And so I just read his newsletter for his insights. And he wrote one about stuff that we didn't talk about in the initial interview, things that I've become very interested since, like superhydration, like intermittent fasting, and like cold showers and ice baths, and basically adapting ourselves to discomfort so that we can lead healthy, happy lives. So this is a short episode, so if you're queuing this up for your 5-hour Saturday run, go find something else. This is going to be under an hour for the whole thing, including intro, outro, and music. Speaking of music, I just grabbed off of YouTube a little bit of Bob playing the Elgar Cello Concerto in E minor with the South Jersey Youth Orchestra. Bob volunteered as their guest soloist. So let's enjoy a few seconds of that before we get into our interview. So without further ado, Bob Cafaro, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Howard, it's a pleasure to be back with you. I know we've communicated in email a few times, but it's always nice to be in the digital flesh, so to speak.
Yeah, and you're looking great. So those of you who are listening to the audio, we are recording a video of this, which will be linked in the show notes. So you're looking great. So I guess everything's still working.
Everything is great. I'm living the dream. I've got a true second chance at life, and I'm trying to do something with my life the second time around. So, not many people get a second chance at life, and that's what I have. So,
yeah. So I wanted to talk to you because you just put out a newsletter, and by the way, you have a wonderful newsletter, and I hope you'll tell people how they can get on it because it's I don't read a lot of newsletters anymore, but yours is one that I always look forward to.
I do it monthly, and just in case anyone wants to get it, just shoot me an email, info@bobcafaro.com, and you'll be added to the list. So anybody that purchases a book on my website or sends me an email gets on the list. So, and I keep the newsletter rather on the short side. It's not going to be a 10-page newsletter. It's just some interesting things.
So I wanted to do two things. One is to kind of hear how things have been since we last talked. And then in your last newsletter, you mentioned some particular practices that you had not mentioned in the book, and we didn't talk about at all. So first, how are things? What's been happening? I think we probably talked maybe a year and a half ago, maybe longer. So what's new?
Yeah, things were good. Let's see. I've hooked up with Dr. Terry Walls. She contacted me out of the blue and invited me as a guest speaker at the Walls Protocol seminar. That was 2017. So I went there to Cedar Rapids, Iowa in August, and I spoke. I brought books out. I played the cello. I answered questions and met a lot of inspirational people. People that you think there are just a few people that are able to turn these chronic illnesses around, and there is a whole collection of people with such determination, and that was very inspirational to go there. And basically, I've become quite close with Dr. Walls. Things have been really good since we spoke last. I started the newsletter late last year, and my health has been perfect. I feel like I'm getting healthier and younger by the day, if that sounds crazy.
I'm curious because you clearly went to the Dr. Walls conference already completely confident and convinced in our ability to heal ourselves. But seeing so many other people there, were there sort of newcomers for whom that was a kind of a huge insight or revelation that there's actually proof that this stuff works?
Sure, yeah. You've had people that have turned themselves around from a point of near complete debilitation to a pretty normal life, and which is what Dr. Walls did. She was wheelchair bound for 4 years, and now she lives a normal life. She's not in a wheelchair, so it's pretty fascinating. And then I have someone, I'm not at liberty to disclose his name, but he was one of the very first people to buy my book, and he was wheelchair bound, and he was able to take 3 steps out of a wheelchair, and now he's at 104 steps, and his neurologist told him that now he should stop using a wheelchair.
Wow.
So he follows it very strictly, my regimen of hydration, drinking half his body weight in filtered water per day, a plant-based diet, organic, exercise, meditation to learn the placebo effect, and he's off all medication. And again, I'm not condoning that everyone get off medication. I'm not a doctor, and I have no authority to give any advice on medication. So,
right. So one clarification: when you say half your body weight in water, you mean that many pounds in ounces, right? You don't mean you should drink 100 pounds of water a day.
Oh yeah, I don't think you want 100 pounds. So I'm at 160 pounds. I drink 80 ounces a day minimum, and if I'm on the bike in hot weather, I'll probably maybe even double that. Again, not in one sitting, just do it throughout the day.
Great. All right, so can we talk about the stuff you hadn't talked about in the book, I guess the cold therapy,
right,
and some other related things. So where did you first discover this stuff?
Well, what happened was I was first diagnosed. My first symptoms of MS started textbook December 1998, numbness in the right leg. February 1999, optic neuritis in the left eye. I received my first diagnosis of MS. July of 1999, optic neuritis in the right eye. After my second treatment of intravenous steroids, then things went off the edge of the cliff for me. I wound up hospitalized for severe dehydration. I couldn't retain food or water for a week. At that point, I was unable to move my hands. I was legally blind in both eyes. I was incontinent. The entire spectrum was gone. I could hardly walk. I was no physical strength. At that point, I was told I'd be on permanent disability. I started my own research and came up with hydration. And that was when I saw my first sign of improvement. And what happened was I was so terrified of a dreaded fourth attack because they were becoming stronger each time. I was so worried about overheating the body that I started unknowingly exposing my body to cold on a regular basis. So what I was doing, I was taking cold showers every day, this way to avoid heating the body. And then I was biking. Once I found out I could bike, I began increasing the amount of time and the distance on the bike. So here I was biking in, say, high 30s, 40 degrees. I'm biking with a t-shirt and a windbreaker on and a pair of tights, and that was it. So it's very cold weather, but I'm subjecting my body to cold, and I kept biking long distances in sub-freezing temperatures with a minimum amount of clothing.
So what was the theory about, like, what was the problem with heat?
A problem is, that I think people with MS rightly should avoid overheating the body. And it was one neurologist, this was Fred Lublin, who's now head of neurology at Mount Sinai in Manhattan. I had seen him in Hahnemann Hospital, and he told me a good rule of thumb is do not exercise to the point you're sweating. Mm-hmm. So I took that advice to heart, and I really went through great lengths to, keep my body from overheating. And there were a lot of things I did. I would bike in 95-degree weather, but I would use a heavy cotton shirt. I would wet it and then keep that shirt wet. Well, and that really, a wet cotton is a great heat exchanger. They say if you go backpacking, cotton kills because wet cotton clothing will rob body heat from you. But if it's 95 degrees and you're worried about overheating your body, it becomes your best friend at that point. So what I was doing was I was biking in sub-freezing temperatures. I was keeping my house very cold, and I was taking cold showers every day. And I wasn't aware what I was doing until later on. My son, who's a professional MMA fighter, he actually went to Wim Hof. He's the Iceman, known because he's famous for subjecting his body to intense cold for extended periods of time. He swims in Arctic waters. He submerses his body in ice baths for something like 90 minutes. And what he does, and I didn't know about him at the time, and my son went to a seminar and he was telling me all about his breathing technique to force oxygen into the blood to keep it, circulating and keep the extremities warm, and also that this is going to change your immune system. And it was funny because the doctor, the neuro-ophthalmologist who told me I would be on permanent disability, believes that I changed my immune system from going to a plant-based organic diet, that I changed the microbiome in my gut. And also he thinks that when I was doing extensive cycling outside, I was getting high levels of vitamin D. And he referred to the link between low levels of vitamin D and high levels of MS. Mm-hmm. So what I'm beginning to think that subjecting my body to cold on a regular basis was another way that I changed my immune system. And if you think that everything that we do is in a constant temperature, our house, our car, you go food shopping, you go to work, everything you do, it's 75 degrees, right? And the human body is able to adapt, but we lose that body's ability to adapt by keeping in a constant temperature. And, I think there's a price to pay for that. So, it was funny that over Christmas, I had a long discussion with a U.S. Army Ranger, and he was in Afghanistan. And he told me that he was outdoors for 35 days, and he had to sleep in sub-freezing temperatures with no coat. And it was funny to hear his whole theory on how the human body loses the ability to adapt and the cost that we incur by losing that ability. So I think that was another step I had taken, and it was another benefit that I had unknowingly been subjecting my body to cold, therefore getting my immune system to adapt.
So did you also you said you did the cold showers, did you go to ice baths or anything more extreme than cold showers?
No, but I did cold showers every day because I was terrified of overheating my body. So here, I had guessed right again.
So was that a hard thing to do? Because a plant-based diet is basically, you're basically just eating food. But in my own experiences, approaching cold, especially from the place of being a soft 75-degree adapted animal, Did you have, was it easy for you to just jump into the cold, going outside cold and taking the cold showers, or was there a period of, this is just awful?
Well, to me, I explain to people that I was not in a fight against an illness. I was in a fight for my survival, and I wasn't going to lose this fight. And basically, I was willing to sacrifice anything and everything, including everyday comforts. Anything that would help me was done, regardless of how I felt. That's how desperate I was to get my life back. So, to me, if I was uncomfortable, that's such a small, insignificant price to pay.
Mm. And I'm hearing in what you say, the echoes of a lot of people that I work with, that I coach, who don't feel like they're in that kind of fight, and so they're not bringing everything they've got to it. And when I look at you now, like, yeah, you were fighting for your survival, but what you got was so much more than survival.
Right, absolutely. And I tell people that if you just you're diagnosed with a chronic illness and you just take the latest medication and nothing else, you're essentially bringing a knife to a gunfight. You've got to really arm yourself to the teeth and know that you're going to be the last one standing. That was my take on the whole thing.
So for cold showers, how did you do? Did you just jump in cold? Did you just start at a comfortable temperature?
I would just dribble the water and take my time with water dribbling. I mean, that's intense to take an ice cold shower. And I wasn't knowingly setting out to do that. Mm-hmm. I was just setting out to keep my body cool. So I would just a small dribble, and then I would, shampoo, soap up, and then rinse off in the cold dribble. And it takes a little more time, but I think it was effective.
Uh-huh. Now, are you still using cold practices?
I still do, yeah. And now since my son really inspired me, I go outside and I try to subject my body to cold on a regular basis. Like I'll go out for a walk or a quick jog in sub-freezing temperatures with just a pair of shorts on. Mm. And I think, you do that, you breathe. And I find that the best thing to do is you take your breath, you do your deep breathing, and your last breath, you breathe in, you hold it, and then you push like you're trying to go to the bathroom. You push hard and you force that oxygen into your extremities to keep the body warm.
Because I know I interviewed Scott Carney, who wrote a book about Wim Hof, among other people, called What Doesn't Kill Us. And he gave in the book a kind of a basic sort of 15-minute Wim Hof breathing exercise that I've been doing most mornings, where you're like kind of hyperventilating and then breath and then holding breaths. And I wasn't exactly sure, like, this is weird to say as a guy who writes about science, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was doing for me. But it felt good.
Well, I think any deep breathing, it was funny. I studied. I took yoga from a yoga instructor whom I really respect, and she says that a whole cycle of yogic breathing provides the same benefit as 5 miles of running. And I believe that because when you do that systematic breathing to oxygenate the blood and circulate it throughout the system, I mean, that's essentially what Wim Hof is doing, is yogic breathing. Mm-hmm. The science of yoga is 5,000 years old. So that's, I think, what Wim Hof is doing essentially. He's got yogic breathing down to suit his needs.
So what got your son interested in Wim Hof?
Well, he started wrestling in high school, and then he basically, morphed into MMA fighting. I don't know how, and he is. It's funny because if you don't believe in genetics, I look at him and I see the way he devotes his entire life to MMA fighting, the way I devoted my entire life to the cello, the way I devoted my entire existence to beating an incurable illness. That's the way he is. I mean, everything about his life, his diet, his, everything about his lifestyle. He keeps track of the amount of water he drinks. When he has to make weight for a fight, he'll get down to 25 pounds below his normal weight, and then in 24 hours, he'll gain 20 pounds for the fight. And it's just fascinating to watch how he sacrifices anything and everything for something he loves.
And so he thought that Wim Hof was going to give him some sort of edge.
Yeah, well, he went to Wim Hof's seminar in New York, and he's so proud of his picture with Wim Hof. And my son subjects himself to ice water every day. He takes cold showers, and then he has a big, giant recycling pail, and he fills it with water, and then he dumps in bags of ice. And in the winter, he'll go out and break the ice off, and then get in there for maybe 10 minutes or so. He does it every day. Yeah, so, it's funny, you're getting old when your children start teaching you things, So,
yeah. So have you gotten a recycling pail yet?
No, but I've gotten back to, being outdoors in the cold and, dribbling the cold water in the showers again. I've gotten back to it.
Right. Because I really have trouble with the showers. Because it just feels, because my shower is like one of these, low flow, environmentally conscious showers. And so it's just like constantly like dinging me. What I do is I'll take a bucket of cold or ice water, 5-gallon bucket, and slowly pour it over myself in the morning. It just feels like a punch rather than like death by 1,000 blows.
Well, I'm beginning to think that really does turbocharge your immune system because you're forcing your body to adapt.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That's my take on it. That you're forcing changes to your immune system by doing that.
Yeah, I think in that book about Wim Hof, he talked about the immune system, especially around autoimmune diseases, that one of the reasons we have such high prevalence of it in our culture is because of all the comfort that the immune system without something to fight against is like a bored puppy left in the house. It's just going to start chewing on whatever it can find.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they say that one reason that a lot of children have allergies so bad is because, we live in such a clean environment. Every speck of dust is removed from the air and the kids are not exposed to germs or dirt or anything, and their immune systems never learn how to develop because they live in such a sterile environment.
Yeah, I think my children should be very pleased that I'm a slob. I did them a big favor.
I love it.
Yeah. So,
excellent.
So what's new for you? What's coming up?
So the other thing I did was, I was drinking so much water that I was intermittently fasting, unknowingly. I was fasting for 12 to 15 hours a day, and the reason is I would start every morning by drinking almost 2 liters of water, and when you're putting that much water into your system, there's no room for food. So my first sensation of hunger would occur around maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is more than 12 hours after I ate. So when I met with Dr. Walls, I videoed our conversation and I put it up in segments. And she talked about when you fast, the human body, the cells of the body go into heal and rebuild mode. And I didn't realize that I had been fasting for 12 to 15 hours every day. And what happened was she really got me into this, and I started fasting again 1 day a week for 36 hours. And recently I fasted for 96 hours on water alone. I drank 3.5 liters of water per day for 96 hours, which is 4 days.
And were you fully functional at that time, or were you just sort of staying home, taking days off?
I felt weak and tired after 2 days, but after 4 days I felt like I was on helium. I felt very light and clean. All the normal aches and pains were gone. And I only ate because I thought I should after 4 days, because I had never gone that long intentionally without food.
Wow.
So,
yeah. And we're so much more efficient when we're not constantly like cooking and eating and cleaning.
Right. And if you think that, especially the older we get, right, our caloric needs diminish drastically. But yet, if you think that in our society, we don't eat because we're hungry. We eat because it's time to eat. Right? You're on a schedule. It's time for breakfast. It's time for lunch, time for dinner, have a midnight snack. And how much food does the human body really need? And I believe that the human body was meant to go extended periods without food. And again, we don't know how to adapt because we've lost the sensation of hunger. And I believe there's a price to pay for that as well.
Right. So these are all like immune challenges.
Right. So I've gotten back to, religiously fasting 1 day a week for 36 hours. And in that 36 hours, I drink about 5 liters of filtered water. So, just as a note here, I'm up in Saratoga, New York right now, Saratoga Springs, and I'm volunteering my week. I do a lot of volunteer work, and I'm visiting schools. I visit 2 to 3 schools a day for 5 days right now, and I get water out of the Saratoga Spring here. There's a big pavilion. There are several of them in the area, and you can go get the spring water, and it's just amazing. It's one of the only places where I don't filter the water before I drink.
So what are you talking to kids about, music or about health or everything?
Yeah, I really don't talk about health because it was Saratoga is a place that was transformational for me as a student. It really inspired me to love the cello and devote my life to it. And, that's basically, I want to give back to a program. I came here, a program called the School of Orchestral Studies. This was in August of 1975, and it was something that changed my life forever. And I am so grateful. So I want to come up here and I give back. I volunteer 1 week a year, and I visit the schools every day. And it's just, it's magical for me to be here.
Yeah. So I realize you don't have any, before or after or control to answer this question, but I'm really curious. What's your thoughts on just the healing power of immersing yourself in music?
I believe music is a major benefit because it uses parts of the brain that would otherwise not be used. And it's funny. I've read more about this, and if you realize that all the things that take place when you're playing a musical instrument, right? The coordination of an athlete, you have the mind of the scientist. You're interpreting, you're creating, you're doing so many things with the brain when you're playing an instrument, right? And I think that has such benefits because, to me, the mind is such an untapped resource when it comes to healing the body. And, I talked about this in my book, The Placebo Effect. And if you look at how, you get all these people in the placebo groups of clinical trials that inexplicably improve. And it's written off as an anomaly by science and medicine. But to me, it's not. That these people unknowingly possess some ability of their mind to make changes to the body. So, having believed this, and anybody that disagrees with me on this should look at the minoxidil Rogaine clinical trial study, where 18% of the men in the placebo group started growing hair where they didn't have it. So, any disbelievers out there should tell me. They should explain that one to me, how that takes place, right?
Right. I just started listening to an audiobook on the placebo effect. It's got some really interesting science. It's called Suggestible You, by Eric Vance. And it looks at sort of the latest neuroscience of placebo in terms of, like, you can actually find neural circuits that certain drugs will block, so that the placebo effect simply will not work. So they're discovering, I think, that the placebo effect, it's not just like, you're suggestible, or, you're like weak-minded, and the doctor, or you can fool yourself. They're like actual, neurochemical pathways in the brain that are specifically designed to heal you.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Yeah.
Right. And some really interesting studies where there was placebo effect even when you told people this is a placebo, but it was actually subconscious. Like the brain says, "Oh, pill is placebo," the same way that like Pavlov's dogs were salivating. Right. So you don't actually have to believe it. You don't have to be the sort of person who can be fooled. It's not about gullibility. Even if I say to you, this is a placebo pill, that your body will start acting, just based on a subconscious trigger.
Wow. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in the placebo effect, and it was funny. I talk about in my book. I have a chapter, people who accomplished the impossible. These people who did things, and one of them passed away recently. Roger Bannister.
Mm-hmm.
Was sad to see him leave us, but I never got to meet him. But I did get a picture of him with my book. He's one of the people I had written about. But I believe that these people whom I had written about, Nando Parado in survival, Nolan Ryan, pitcher in sports, Jascha Heifetz, the violinist, and some people may disagree with me on this, but Lance Armstrong, the cyclist. But if you put these people in a placebo group of a clinical trial, these people would all get better because they have that ability to basically focus their minds and accomplish whatever they want. And, healing the body would just be another accomplishment for them.
Right on. So, what have you got coming up? I know your newsletter is growing, and I know you mentioned earlier that you've got 5 jobs. You're not sure like how far you want to take the healing part of your journey. Anything we should be looking out for?
Well, I've got a cello recital this Sunday, and then I play the Elgar Cello Concerto with the youth orchestra in South Jersey on Wednesday. So I'm kind of married to the cello right now. Social media has kind of been put on the back burner right now. But, when you're doing high-level playing in front of people, you want to be up there with the cello in your hands and not part of your anatomy. So, I'm alluding to The Godfather. I'm sure we know that scene. Didn't want his brother coming out of the bathroom with just never mind. So,
yeah, I think those who got it.
So anyway, yeah, but my true love is playing the cello and music, and I try to do what I can with it.
All right.
I stay in shape. I devote a lot of time and effort and love to it. So.
Right. Well, so the website for people who want to kind of follow along is bobcafaro.com.
Right, and also I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I also have a video series on YouTube. You can look, links on Facebook, it's The Bob Cafaro on Facebook and Instagram. So
great. Well, I'll include links to all that in the show notes. And it's great to check in and see you again.
Great to be in touch, great to hear your voice, and great to see your face again. And again, I admire what you do so much, and keep spreading the good word. I know you have a big following, and it's phenomenal what you do.
Well, it's nice when you have the truth as the wind at your back, right?
That it is, yeah. So,
Bob, thanks so much for taking the time and for continuing to be a pioneer and an inspiration.
Yeah, Howard, thank you for inviting me to appear on your podcast.
Well, I hope you got out of that interview as much as I did in terms of my rededication to what we'll call grit, what CEO of Wellstart, Olivia Kelly, likes to refer to as gratification, as in instant gratification, as in the opposite of instant gratification, where we're willingly putting ourselves into uncomfortable situations and circumstances to build our anti-fragility, to build our body and our mind's ability to adapt to the various circumstances that life throws at us. Because if we don't have the ability to adapt, then things are going to come along that we're not going to be able to adapt to. If you remember my interview number 197, so if you go to plantyourself.com/197, you can hear me talk with Scott Carney, the author of the very aptly named book, What Doesn't Kill Us? Subtitle, How Freezing Water, Extreme Altitude, and Environmental Conditioning Will Renew Our Lost Evolutionary Strength. So Bob is a prime example of what happens when we give our immune system something challenging to do on a regular basis. It kind of doesn't have time or energy to do autoimmune stuff like multiple sclerosis. Let's take care of some business. If you enjoyed this episode of the Plant Yourself podcast and you'd like to support the mission of the show, you can subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. If you're looking for big bang for little buck, that's the one thing to do. That increases our listenership and our promotional scope more than anything else that you can do in 2 minutes without spending any money. Speaking of money, if you'd like to spend some to support the show, just kind of like an NPR fund drive, this is the 15-second version within every hour or so of podcasting. You can go to patreon.com/plantyourself, and you can make a monthly ongoing contribution to the show. Every time I get another bunch of subscribers, I upgrade something. I've upgraded audio. I've started upgrading some video so I can throw these on YouTube. I just upgraded a beautiful travel kit. And I just came back from Plant Stock 2018, the Engine 2 event, which was phenomenal, which I'll be talking about in a couple of weeks. And I managed to grab a pretty decent audio recording of a big change panel featuring Josh Lajani, Adam Sudd, Ken Lander, and Joseph Alexander. And if you don't know those guys' stories, you should. Everybody should. And we'll be sharing their answers to a bunch of audience Q&A probably next week. So for everyone who's contributed, you helped me get the right gear to capture that beautiful lightning in a bottle. If you're looking for help with your own big change, go to wellstarthealth.com, read all about it, and you can sign up to be notified of our next cohort. We just had one start, so we're going to be waiting a few weeks before starting a new one. But if you do get on the waiting list, you will get dripped some great content to kind of get you engaged and get you going before the official cohort begins. If you'd like to check out the show notes for today's episode with links to all the things we talked about, you can go to plantyourself.com/284. And if you're new to this show, you can catch up on 283 archived episodes over at plantyourself.com. The last two have both been musically based. That's not usual. Mostly it's a focus on health with a lot of talk about food and nutrition, but we're on a musical roll, so why not? In garden news, Mia harvested the edamame today, the soybeans, and we are eating tons and tons of these fresh soybeans, like the kind you pay like $5 for a small bowl in a Japanese restaurant. We are up to our ears in them. They are delicious. We also are overgrown with tulsi, also known as holy basil, and we were going to pull all that out today, but then Mia noticed that the bees were really enjoying it and just taking these wonderful, luxurious pollen baths in the tulsi flowers. So they stay, and we'll just have to make do with less space. And they like to grow in the path, so it's kind of a pain in the ass to get around them, but we do what we can. And of course, the bees pretty much always come first because they are our best workers in the garden. In running news, I led a couple of fun, shortish runs up at Plant Stock, but it's so hilly up there, they felt like longish runs. Took yesterday off, and I'm running slow, but I just keep telling myself I'm building my zone 2 capacity and still looking for a fun race to enter maybe later in the fall or maybe in the winter, someplace in the south, someplace nice and warm. Okay, so thanks to Will Ridenauer for letting me use Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace, as this show's theme music. We'll close with it. And if you want to keep listening to more cello stuff, I'll include a link to the full Elgar Concerto in E minor on YouTube in the show notes for today's episode. And of course, thanks to all you Plant Yourself podcast patrons, as in Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jean Wheeler, Alan Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elsbeth Theldon, Victoria Dolomanova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Andrew, Josina, Julianne Rowland, Stu Dolnick, Sarah Durkis, Ramses Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzik, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lacer, David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesen, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, The Equally Mysterious Tracy Z, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linderman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Stephanie Holmes, Martha Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corker, and Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Copel, Shell Rudless, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Brian Sheridan, Shannon Hirschman, Kate Rolls, Linda Ayat, Julie Lang, Home Hedegaard, Isa Tuzin, Wakani Hainline, Erin Greer, Alicia Davis, Aviva Lael, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Olakowski of Plant Power for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Kelly Baker Miracle, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Helly Shendy, Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divitt, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Deb Cassia, Emily Iconelli, and welcome to Levy Wallach. And thanks to you all for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Mr. Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nilsson, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jennifer Kanofsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby. Hi, Janet. Claire Adams, Tom Franzak, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lacert, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesen, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, The Equally Mysterious, Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Nolly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharp, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch at Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Coble, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Holm Hedegaard, Izatu Zinwa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Olakoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen Jo Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justin Divich, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Trish Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagen, Tracy Gullitz, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Paran Ganshi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Nayak, Erica Piedra, Danielle Roberts, Michael Lushton, and Sarah Johnson for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for now. As always, be well, my friends.